The voice of the Holy Spirit often comes as a quiet whisper, a tender presence that does not demand but gently draws near. Yet this whisper can grow faint, not because the world is too loud, but because the heart has built walls, often without realizing it. These walls are not made of stone or wood, but of habits that slowly settle into the soul, dulling the senses that once listened so clearly. It is in these silent spaces where the Spirit's voice softens and retreats that many find themselves feeling distant, unseen, or unheard. Yet this distance is not a final exile, but an invitation to return to the stillness where God's warmth awaits. In the quiet unfolding of this journey, there is hope. Hope to recognize the hidden ways we have silenced the Spirit, and gentle grace to welcome the voice back into our lives. Today we will walk through 5 tender signs of these silent barriers, not as a call to shame or guilt, but as a pathway toward healing and renewal. Each sign is a quiet mirror, reflecting parts of the heart that long for God's presence, but have grown weary or distracted. As we move through these reflections, there is space to breathe, to see, and to meet the Spirit again, softly, deeply, and lovingly. This is not a hurried journey, but a sacred pause, a moment to be embraced and held. If you carry a heaviness that words have not touched, or a longing that feels hard to name, these reflections are meant to meet you there. You are not alone, and the Spirit's whisper has not gone silent. It waits patiently for the door to open once more. The stillness of the soul is a sacred place, where the Spirit's voice is heard most clearly. It is not a silence that empties the heart, but one that fills it with a deep peace. In the quiet, the gentle nudges of God can rise like a soft melody, steady and sure. Yet when the rush of life sweeps in, filling every moment with noise and movement, that sacred silence slips away. The Spirit's whisper, delicate as the breeze, grows faint. It is as if the soul has become numb to its own longing, dulled by constant distraction. Jesus knew the power of stillness. Time and again he withdrew from the crowd and the noise to find quiet places where prayer and presence could breathe. In those moments his spirit was renewed and his path made clear. The example is not just for those ancient days, but a living invitation for all who seek the presence of God. Rest is not a pause from life's demands, it is the very soil where the Spirit's voice grows loud and sure. Without it, the heart becomes tired and the soul weary, wandering in noise that drowns out what matters most. When every hour is filled with busyness, the quiet spaces between are swallowed whole. The mind, like a restless river, rushes over the banks of peace, carrying away the subtle movements of the Spirit. Even the simplest promptings, the gentle stirrings of love and truth, are lost in the flood. The heart, overwhelmed by the endless tide of tasks and thoughts, stops listening. It hardens against the quiet. The softness of stillness, once a refuge, becomes a distant memory. In the numbness of constant activity, the Spirit's voice does not cease. It waits patiently, longing for a moment when the soul will pause. The call is gentle, never forced. It asks only for a breath, a quiet space where the soul can rest and hear. In these moments, even the faintest whisper of God can become a guiding light. It is a tender invitation to return to a place where life slows and the heart is open. The sacredness of stillness is a gift hidden in plain sight. It is where the Spirit's voice is not drowned but welcomed. When the soul learns once again to pause, to rest, and to listen, it opens the door to a love that is steady and sure. The quiet is not emptiness, but fullness. It is here in the sacred stillness that the Spirit's whisper is born anew. Doubt and fear often rise quietly within the heart, like shadows gathering in a gentle room. They do not shout or demand attention, but settle softly, coloring the spirit with a haze that dims the light of God's truth. When fear takes hold, trust feels fragile, and the Spirit's gentle nudges can seem distant, like a voice speaking in a language that the soul no longer knows well. The heart hesitates, unsure whether to step forward or to hold back, caught between the longing to believe and the weight of uncertainty. In the stillness of this struggle, the Spirit's presence remains near, though it may feel strange or unfamiliar. Doubt is not the enemy, but a quiet threshold where faith is invited to grow. It is here that the tender love of God meets the soul most gently, not with rebuke but with patience. Like Thomas, who needed to see and touch before his faith blossomed, each soul moves at its own pace. There is no shame in needing time to trust more deeply. God's grace is wide enough to hold every question, every hesitation, every silent longing for assurance. The Spirit does not turn away from the clouded heart. Instead, God draws closer, meeting the soul where it is, sometimes in the shadows of doubt, sometimes in the trembling steps toward hope. The path through fear is not one of instant certainty but of gradual opening. Each quiet act of trust, even the smallest, is like a seed planted in soft soil. Over time, faith grows stronger, not in the absence of questions but through them. The heart learns to rest in the promise that God's presence is faithful, even when understanding feels out of reach. Fear may bend the soul's gaze away from God's truth, but it cannot break the tender thread that connects spirit to spirit. The invitation remains open, clear yet gentle. It calls not for perfect faith, but for a willingness to walk toward the light, step by step. In this sacred space, doubt becomes not a barrier but a doorway, one that leads to deeper trust and a faith renewed by grace. The Spirit's whisper, though sometimes faint, is always present, waiting for the heart to lean in once again. Pride often creeps into the heart softly, like a quiet voice that promises strength and independence. It tells the soul that help is not needed, that one can bear burdens alone, without leaning into the gentle guidance of the Spirit. This whisper of self-reliance can build walls around the heart, walls that are not obvious or harsh, but subtle and unyielding. Within these walls, the Spirit's voice grows distant, unable to reach the humble ground it longs to dwell in. The strength that pride claims is fragile when set against the deep grace that flourishes in surrender. The Spirit finds its home not in hearts that resist, but in those willing to bow. The sacred invitation is always toward humility, a softness that does not weaken, but opens the soul to be shaped and renewed. The quiet power of humility is seen in the words of Scripture. God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. This is not a call to shame but an offer of freedom. When pride closes the door, grace cannot enter fully. But when the heart steps back from its own strength, even just a little, the Spirit moves freely, breathing new life into what seemed fixed and unchanging. Walls built by pride often hide beneath layers of busyness, control, and the desire to prove oneself. These walls keep the heart from the deep rest that comes in knowing we are held, not by our own efforts, but by God's unfailing love. The Spirit longs for a heart surrendered enough to listen, to follow, and to trust the path even when it leads through uncertainty. This surrender is not weakness but courage, a quiet bravery in letting go and allowing God's gentle hands to guide the way. Within this space of humility, the Spirit's voice is not a distant echo but a steady companion. It is a voice that shapes the heart like soft clay, forming it into something beautiful and whole. Pride may promise strength, but it is in surrender that true strength is born. The Spirit waits patiently for the walls to fall, for the heart to open wide, and for grace to flow freely once again. This is the sacred dance between pride and humility, where the Spirit calls us gently to come home to a love that carries all things with tender care. There are wounds carried deep within the heart, silent burdens that weigh heavily on the soul. These pains, when left unspoken, grow like shadows stretching across the spirit, thickening the stillness with heaviness. The silence around them is not peace, but a quiet barrier that keeps the spirit at a distance. The gentle voice of God calls toward healing waters, but when pain is locked away, the soul remains thirsty and unsettled. The Spirit's peace, so tender and life-giving, waits patiently for the moment when the heart will surrender its hidden grief. God's heart is close to the broken-hearted, drawing near to those who carry wounds that feel too deep to share. There is no rush or demand in this approach, only a quiet invitation to bring what is held in secret into the light. This act of confession is not a moment of weakness, but one of courage and trust. Like Jesus, who healed the broken and lifted the weary, God's gentle hands reach out to touch those places of pain, inviting release and renewal. The spirit longs to flow freely through the soul, but this can only happen when the heaviness is laid down. Pain kept inside becomes a silent wall, a quiet thief of joy and connection. It muffles the soft whispers of grace and hope. Yet when the heart allows itself to face the truth of its wounds, a new path opens. It is a path marked not by forgetfulness but by healing, a healing that embraces the brokenness without fear or shame. The Spirit moves in these sacred spaces, weaving peace where there was once only silence. The journey through pain toward peace is gentle and slow. It does not force the soul to rush or hide from what is difficult. Instead, it invites a tender surrender, a willingness to trust God with the broken pieces. In this surrender, the Spirit breathes new life, restoring what was worn and weary. The silence that once silenced the soul is transformed into a quiet song of healing and hope, a sacred space where God's peace flows freely once more. The heart that fixes its gaze too closely on what is fleeting can lose sight of the eternal light that the Spirit offers. When the soul is wrapped tightly around the temporary things that fade, moments that pass, worries that weigh, the steady call of God's eternal hope can grow distant, almost like a forgotten melody. Yet this hope is not far away. It is woven deeply into the fabric of our being, waiting quietly for eyes to lift and rest beyond the scene. The Spirit breathes into this hope, inviting the soul to a place of rest, even when the world feels uncertain and fragile. The Apostle Paul spoke of this gentle turning, an invitation to set the mind on things above, not on earthly things. This is not a denial of the life we live, but a sacred redirection of focus. It is the opening of a window through which the Spirit's breath can enter freely, bringing peace that does not depend on circumstance. When the gaze shifts toward eternal truths, the soul finds a quiet strength. This strength is not loud or brash, but calm and steady, a foundation that holds firm through seasons of doubt and change. In this looking beyond, hope takes root. It is a hope that does not disappoint, because it is anchored in the promises of God, promises that hold through every storm and every shadow. The Spirit gently reminds the heart that even in the midst of uncertainty, there is a place of peace that cannot be shaken. This peace comes not from the shifting tides of life, but from the eternal love that surrounds and sustains. The soul is invited to rest here, to breathe deeply in the assurance that God's faithfulness endures beyond what eyes can see. The wandering gaze, drawn away by the weight of the moment, can find its way back through the Spirit's quiet call. It is a call to trust, to hope, and to rest in the sacred promises that stretch beyond time. In this return, the heart is made whole again, softened, renewed, and filled with a hope that shines steadily through all seasons. The Spirit's voice is always present, patiently inviting the soul to lift its eyes and find rest in the eternal. The journey inward is never hurried, and the Spirit's voice never demands. It waits patiently, inviting the heart to come home to a stillness, where healing begins and hope quietly blooms. Each step toward openness, whether through stillness, trust, humility, surrender, or lifted eyes, draws us closer to the gentle presence of God. In that presence, the soul finds rest beyond all understanding, a peace that holds even the deepest wounds and the heaviest doubts. May this quiet truth settle softly within you. You are seen, you are held, and the Spirit's whisper is never far. If this reflection has brought a measure of peace or opened a gentle door in your heart, you are welcome here. When you feel led, joining us by liking this video and subscribing helps keep this quiet space alive, a refuge where we can return again and again. May grace and peace surround you always.